to step out and live fully. I think the biggest boundary or chain that holds us back is our own fear of failure and wanting to be mattered and to see.
Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us for another insightful episode with interesting conversation. Today, we're going to have this conversation a little bit differently. We are going to have a live audience, free flow of conversation. And we want to talk about something that's on most of our minds. How do we courageously step into pursuing and living our dreams? And how do we build meaningful adult friendships that can help support us and be our blind spot watchers to successfully do just that? Joining us today are our live audience, Dr. Nandini Menon, and my dear co-host and friend, Robin Johnson. Both of you, welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So as we get started, Nandini, I'm going to start with you since you have some thoughts on the first part of this conversation. What does it take for us to step in and courageously live our dream? And what could be getting in our way?
This is something that I've been struggling with because, as we live through life, we get life experiences and then we come to certain conclusions and self-realizations. And a lot of times we also recognize our own biases and areas where we need to strengthen ourselves. And sometimes those things stop us when we suddenly recognize as we live through our lives and start comparing ourselves and our achievements with our co-workers or colleagues or peers. And it stops us from living our life to the fullest. And so for me, I feel that is something that resonates with a lot of us once we start working and once we start living our life. So as I've been living through this journey of trying to figure out why I feel stuck or why I feel isolated, I've come to realize and recognize that it's all within me, and I have the strength and the power to recognize the parts of me that maybe I don't like, or I feel ashamed of, or feel is not good enough. And the biggest stepping stone for someone to be able to live courageously and live their dream and be authentic is accepting those parts and loving them equally.
This is really interesting what you're saying. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your thoughts with us, because I believe everybody, and I certainly have had those identical feelings. What is popping up for me is the notion of wanting to do something, living your dream, as you've put it beautifully, and then comparing ourselves to someone else and then feeling bad about ourselves because we're not as far along down the journey. And I think that moment of comparison is the trigger to then being a downward spiral, and then live your dreams and step into them even less. And I absolutely have felt that many, many times in many venues, many arenas. But I was at a training where they talked about this notion is a kind of a training along mindset and those things. And it's along the notion of, no, you are exactly where you are because of a variety of life circumstances. and you are where you should be, or you are where you are. And someone who might appear to be ahead of you, they just had a different set of life circumstances. And so whatever life circumstances were going on for me where I am, I've been collecting experiences that have made me be where I am. And now I can take those experiences and the strengths that I've gained from those experiences that might have appeared to have held me back, and I can actually use them to then propel myself forward. And so, and then other thing is this notion of comparison. What's popping into my head again is along those lines is in my community, there was a woman who was a seamstress, and she had her own bridal shop where she would sew these beautiful bridal gowns and prom dresses and all of these things. And there were some prom dresses that girls would buy that weren't very modest. And so they would bring them to her, and it was like she would create her magic and turn these prom dresses, still looking absolutely beautiful, just slightly more modest. And it was like working magic because they looked absolutely gorgeous. One day I was driving into a Ross, where you drive into Ross's store where you buy things. And it's like a department type store. And as I was pulling in, I saw her coming out, and she was kind of walking along, and kind of end of the day. And I thought, any person who didn't know her, they would think, here's this kind of old Hispanic, frumpy looking lady of no consequence. But I knew her. And I knew that she was amazingly talented and that she worked magic for dozens of girls and their families. And I think sometimes are we looking at ourselves and seeing just this older Hispanic frumpy person, as opposed to looking at ourselves the way other people see us, as being someone accomplished and inspiring and having done good things. And even if those good things are only done in a tiny corner of the world, that still matters. So anyway, those are my rambling thoughts.
I absolutely love the example you just gave, Robin. And thank you, Nandini, for presenting a scenario that we all face, especially women, because there are, regardless of how professional and how professionally accomplished we are, there are different places and spaces in our life. Even if we don't feel inadequate, other people remind us. They remind us that we are somehow less than or inadequate, right? That is also something we have to face. I understand where some of that insecurities come from. We all have it. And even when we get past it, others will remind us. The interesting question I always get asked, I know you're going to jump in and say you have experienced the same, Nandini. I chose not to have children because I'd grown up in the middle of a war. I had seen how awful humanity can be to children. And I made a promise to myself as a child, while being a refugee, before I was a teenager, that I will never bring new life into this world, but I will do everything in my power to love and care and empower the lives that are already here. That's a choice I made to myself as a young girl. And I have kept that promise. I am happily married. I married a man who was comfortable with that choice and who was willing to honor that choice for me. And I constantly get asked, oh, you don't have children. Do you have kids? That's why you can do that. That's why you can do this. And my response is, I never gave birth, but I have children. I have children in my life who call me mama, and I have children in my life who will come on a drop of a hat to be there for us. And we have been there for them, and we've raised them. And so it is these societal norms, societal rules, and societal way of stigmatizing somebody because they want to show that you're really not that good. And how do we deal with that? And how do we, I personally don't take it to my heart because people can talk. And the self-talk I have is just because a crow is sitting on a branch and yelling and yelling and yelling, nothing happens to everything around it, right? So in Tamil, we say, just because a crow yelled at a cow, the cow doesn't drop dead, right? So I am able to see the fun and the ignorance of that and walk away. But I can also see how that can affect somebody who can be in a vulnerable position, especially with everything we see in the world today.
Yes. So what I'm hearing from you is that when you've made your choices in life and there's a lot of talking outside about those choices and your decisions, you have the self-awareness and the self-worth that this choice is right for you. And that one part of it. And the other one is that you're grateful because your life, you have found a partner who supports these views and you support their views. Is that correct where I'm coming from?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yes. And I guess that is where the courage comes. Some people have it innate where you just, recognize your own self-worth and you have the courage to still do. And so when I hear you say that, I'm wondering also because I'm wondering about blind spots. Like, so when do you know that the crow is crowing and you can walk away from it because you know what you're doing is correct? And when do you listen and say, is there something here that I need to tweak? Or is there something here that is real, that needs a blind spot, as you call it?
So that's an interesting question, right? For me, I look at the source and what is being said. If what is being said is to diminish me or anybody else, we, Nandini, come from a culture where if you don't have children, you're considered a barren woman and you're not welcome into a wedding. You're welcome to a funeral, but you're not welcome to a wedding. You're not welcome in any joyful instances in life, right? And so I understand where some of those cultural stigmas come from. And when comments and things come from that place, like, for us, coming of age, girls going through puberty is a big celebration, right? My own brothers won't invite me to their daughters' celebrations because I'm considered a barren woman and being there is not good for their daughters. Me being there is not good for their daughters. But when I die, I don't have children, so everything I have is going to go to them. And I want this jewelry for my daughter, and I want that jewelry for my daughter. So I understand where both of them are coming from. And those I don't take to heart. But when somebody talks about, hey, Mike and you are getting old, you don't have kids. Have you thought about that? Have you thought about this? These are some of the things you may want to do. Those are meaningful, impactful points of consideration. And those are worth exploring, right? So understanding the difference, understanding the source, and understanding where is it coming from in terms of kindness and compassion and empathy, or a reason to exclude. I'm at peace with both, but I don't want to dwell on the exclusion because when somebody excludes, it's their fear, it's their bias. But if somebody wants to share thoughts and give suggestions, then to me, that's coming from a place of, that should be explored. Talk to me a little more. Help me see a little deeper of where you're coming from.
It's interesting. I think what you're touching on is a yes and situation, is that internally we need to be aware of our choices, their consequences, and what we want for our lives, and have the courage to step into that. And there are also times where we need systemic changes, that the system itself, we can have all of the courage and deep knowledge of our own worth, and stepping out and doing great things in the world, even if they just are in a tiny corner of the world. But if the system itself is very dampening and excluding and not giving opportunity, and having some of the norms that you've just described, then we have to change the system as well. So it's kind of a yes and. We need to change individually, but we also need to look and see, is there something within the system that needs to be changed?
Yeah, I like the yes and. It creates the openness and the invitation to enter into a conversation, which goes back to what Kasturi was saying, listening to which crow, because in both ways, it sounded as if you have to come in an open, kind of curious situation where even if you disagree with the person, you have to be willing to ask, yes, and why do you feel that way, so that you can actually, so that I can figure out what the bias is and figure out what the background is. And sometimes that will also explore my own biases, right? When somebody says something, and to be self-aware enough to get that it's not personal, it's their perspective and it's their experience that just creates whatever it is they're saying. And it doesn't mean that I am right or I am wrong, or that I am weak and they are strong, kind of a situation. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you phrased it, Nandan. We are living in a male, Western, masculine constructed world of dichotomy, right? Right or wrong, strong or weak. But I look at life in a continuum. Yes, good or bad are on two extremes. Strong and weak are on two extremes. But we live fluidly in the middle. Life happens in the gray, not in the black or white. So just because I am not as strong in something doesn't mean I am weak. As long as I recognize I'm not strong and I reach out to my community, my girlfriends, all my guy friends, and say, hey, I need to get this done, but I know I suck at this. You're so great at this. Is there a possibility for you to come and help? Right? I'll cook for you because you love my food. Can you take care of this for me? Right? It's one of those things where I may not be good enough, but that doesn't stop me from going after it. And who is the person in my community, in my circle, who's great at this? And how do I engage them? And what I have found is when I reach out and ask for help, they're super excited. Oh my God, thank you for asking. I would love to do that for you. Because people sometimes fear about stepping in and helping because they might think I'm stepping into your territory. I'm coming across like I'm manipulative, right? And giving permission to people to please help me, I need it, strengthens the relationship. And I have learned over the years to say, you know what? This is not my wheelhouse. I'm going to get somebody who's better at this to help me. Even if it means I just sing and dance and be silly and entertain them while they take care of things for me, I'm okay being the 3-year-old, right? And so it also then helps us stop comparing. We can't all be good at everything all the time. And as a gardener, I look at my garden and I always say, if every plant looked the same and every plant bloomed the same color, same time, what happens the rest of the time? We don't have a garden.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like this comment comes back full circle to Nandini's original comment, where I feel like I'm not doing as well, where I need to make some tweaks, need to make some changes. And, and then, but recognizing, having a moment where you, a moment of acceptance, this is where I am. And then, reaching out for resources that can help you in that area or increase your own capacity. And, there's a little bit of both there. But I think that's kind of coming full circle to where Nandini said she recognizes these things. And instead of, beating ourselves up, because we perceive ourselves to be deficient in these areas, and maybe we are truly deficient in those areas. It's the courage to then reach out, ask for help, the courage to reach out and find ways to increase our capacity. Anyway, it's interesting that this is, I feel like it's almost come back to full circle. And once again, the mindset of what are we going to do? So being open enough to recognize where we are lacking and being comfortable with that. And then what are we going to do about it? So I really like how this conversation is kind of dovetailed and swirled around and come back onto it. So
yes. And I like how we've moved from exploring where our weaknesses are to the acceptance and the recognition and acceptance of deficiencies and being and the growth that comes with that, looking for help and vulnerability and growth that comes with it, because unless you're vulnerable, you will lose out on growth, I think, a lot of times. And that comes back to what stops us a lot of times from doing what we want and showing up authentically, because we want to be accepted, and we're so afraid that if we say exactly how we feel or what we think, we won't be accepted, and that would be uncomfortable for us. And so we go with the status quo, and we don't change, like what you said, Robin, change the structure of society or norms that maybe need changing, maybe don't, but unless we voice our opinions, how will we ever know? So
the interesting thing is social change happens much slower, right? It doesn't happen in one person's lifetime, but every generation contributes to the lasting change, right? It never happens overnight. And to be at peace with that, I've done my part. I've built the foundation, and the next generation will put the next 2 layers, and it might be a 10-story building, and it will take time. But with time, things change. We are seeing a world today where a lot of women are choosing not to get married, or even if they got married, not to have children. Because research shows that the happiest people are unmarried women, right? And the happiest men are married men. And the funny thing is, marriage is more for the men. It's the woman's job to stay home and take care of everything. That's because they can go live their dream, right? So the woman gives up her dream so that the man can go and live his. That has been the tradition in a patriarchy. And women are questioning it all over the world, in Sri Lanka, in India, in the United States, everywhere. And so it's interesting to see how generational change happens, because what we go through and the sacrifices we make, our daughters don't miss. And their daughters don't miss, right? So over time, they're course correcting. And whether they are daughters we gave birth to or daughters we raised, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's interesting that change happens slowly, but it does happen. And I know that, for example, looking at my daughter and her husband, and they have children, much more egalitarian, much more where he is fully participative. It's not her doing everything. He is fully participating in changing diapers, taking kids to ballet class, helping to plan the schedule. And so I think that their change, and it does sometimes occur from generation to generation. And I think what is also be useful is to step back and acknowledge, hey, there has been a lot of progress made. In my program at Penn, Dr. Seligman, Marty, told us about a book called Factfulness, 10 Things About Why the World is Better Than You Think It Is. And we often complain about how terrible things are. But in reality, you look at all these statistics. What is infant mortality today compared to 1,000 years ago, or even 100 years ago, maybe 200 years ago? What is the degree of countries that had even any form of democracy today compared to 200 years ago or 500 years ago? So, And even in the United States today, there are certain factions that want to say everything is terrible, when in fact, there's a lot of really good news out there. So I think by stepping back and looking at the progress that has been made, that can give us courage to continue moving forward and making more progress, and not just, complaining about things. So,
when I hear you say that, Robin, the fact about stepping back and looking at progress and seeing the change and recognizing it, what came to my mind is that sometimes, like for example, what Kasturi said, more women are not getting married, more women are not having children. And when you step back and look at that, you're like, oh my God, what's, might be somebody's reaction. And in reality, sometimes it looks like it's a step back or a step forward. For some people, that's a step back. For some people, that's a step forward. And then you also recognize what you said, unless the women made those decisions not to have children, not to get married, society would not have corrected itself. We would not be faced, we would be in a situation where marriages was still gender separate, like you have this job, I have this job, and this is how it's going to be. And it's not sustainable. And that's why, marriages now and men and women are being more egalitarian, being more equal, and learning to adapt so that women can also make the choice of getting married if we want, of having we want, and living together and harmonizing and having both the way we as a society would like to, right? And so a lot of things, like even in the politics today, where we look back and we're, like you said, some factions are up in arms thinking that, oh my God, we've gone back 5 steps, what's going on? Sometimes those things are just breaks in society, just a break, a stop, a hard, where we're uncomfortable and we react and we course correct and we move forward again. And I think accepting that when things don't go our way, it comes down to those things, and we can down to say, like, when things don't go my way, it doesn't necessarily mean my way is the wrong way, or my way is, or their way is the wrong way. It just means that there might be a different way that connects both our ways, and we can move forward in a more empathic and open relationship between each other.
And that is beautifully said, Nandini. It's funny how time flies when we are having a good conversation. And these are conversations the 3 of us regularly have, right? Because we're friends, we've known each other, we support the Goldilocks community, and you both join as live audience on a regular basis. So it's nice to have our sidebar conversations mainstream here in the podcast. Before we bring this to a close, I really want you to take a moment and share with our audience, what you do for a living, and where people can get a hold of you to get any guidance or help based on the profession that you follow.
Okay, so I wear different hats, but what I'll share with the audience is Robin Learning Systems, and I help organizations create workplaces where people want to stay instead of wanting to leave. And I also have a series of well-being for women workshops that I periodically throughout the year. And that's at robinlearningsystems.com.
Thank you so much, Robin. And I wholeheartedly endorse Robin's programs because I've attended a couple and they're absolutely life-changing. Thank you, Robin.
I am Nandini Menon. I am an ophthalmologist, eye surgeon. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and the easiest way to find me would be LinkedIn, Facebook, although I'm kind of off and on Facebook nowadays. And for me, learning about communicating effectively and self-awareness and growing in my own internal life is where I'm going. And I'm hoping that this internal growth and self realization journey path that I'm in, I'm hoping it takes me somewhere where I'm then able to help and share with other immigrants and students and communities who are, moving to different countries like I did, to navigate the whole cultural and societal norms that we have to adapt to. So thank you.
Thank you much, Nandini. Thank you so much, Robin. This has been a delightful conversation. And to our audience out there, life is never perfect. None of us are ever going to get everything right all the time. And that's part of the fun. We learn, we grow, and we get an opportunity to embrace others and bring them into our lives and build a life of meaning with our community, with our friendships, with our neighbors. And that is what makes life fun, enjoyable, and meaningful. So don't listen to just your self-talk or naysayers and stop living your dream. It's worth pursuing. Live it, and make sure that as you live it, you're growing and you're infusing your relationships, your friendship, your network into it, so that wherever you don't have the strength, you don't have the capabilities or the know-it-all and the skill set, somebody else can step in, because it takes a community to make dreams come true. And it takes all of us to help each other live our purpose and live our dream with joy, embracing our peace.